Hello everybody, my name is Octavian Nadolu, and in this presentation I will give you an update on the features that we added in oXygen 17.1 and some of the new features that will have it in the next version. I have here an overview of the presentation, so I will show you the support for XSLT 3.0 in Schematron, then the multilingual support that we want to add for Schematron in the next oXygen version, and after that some Schematron improvements in the previous oXygen version. So we got a lot of feedback on the XSLT 3.0 support in Schematron, and there were people that are made it patches to have this support. If you edit ISO Schematron schema, there is a query binding attribute that can be added on the Schematron root, and this supports now also XSLT 3. This means that the Schematron can have inside XSLT 3 and will be generated accordingly. And of course you can use also XSLT or XSLT 2. For embedded Schematron rules, there is an option. So if you embed your Schematron rules in XSD or RelaxNG schemas, then you need to set the embed rules query binding language option that you will find it in the Schematron option page. And by default is XSLT 2. For Schematron 1.5, you can use XPath 3.0 if you want. And there is also an option for this in the Schematron option page. By default is 1.0. Now about the multilingual support. So we started to work on this because we also got feedback and people asked us how we can offer the validation error messages from Schematron in different languages. And the Schematron specification has this support specified that you can define diagnostics for each diagnostic for each language, and you can refer the diagnostics from the assertion message or from the report. So based on this Schematron specification, we started to implement it also in oXygen. Here's an example from the Schematron specification. So you have here an assert, and there are two diagnostics, one in English and one in German, and each one has an XML lang attribute depending on the language that you want to use in that diagnostic. And I will show you an example in oXygen how this works. So I have here a similar example. So I have an element and I get an error. The Schematron file used is this one, and it's similar with the one from the presentation but has multiple languages. And we see that we have an English message that will be displayed when you validate the XML schema. This is because by default oXygen presents the messages in the application language. So there are some options available in oXygen that you can use to display the messages. So the first one and the default one is to use the application language. So if you use the Japanese, then you'll get the messages in Japanese and so on. If you want to use the language defined on the Schematron root, then you can set this option, and you'll get the messages that are defined in the language defined in the Schematron file. You can also display all the messages as was before, so you can display all the messages and all the diagnostics that were added on an assert or report. Or you can use your own custom language. And I will show you some examples here. So let's go to the Schematron option page. Okay, so we have these options here. By default, as I told you, it's the application language. And I will switch to the language used on the Schematron route. So you can, my Schematron file has French as the language for the schema. And if I go to my XML file and I validate, I will get the message in French. So you can distribute the schema as you want. If, for example, I don't have the French translation in my message and I forgot to add this here, then if I validate my file, I will get all the messages defined, and these are prefixed with the language that, with the message language. So you know what languages are defined, and you know that your current language is not defined, and fix the problem.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Can you show the Schematron file then?
Yes.
So if I have lots of diagnostic messages,
Yes.
and I add another language, I would have to add a lot of these diagnostics IDs in my patterns or in my rules.
Yes.
Is there a way around it? I understand why that is. Is there a way to easily add another language? Having to add all these IDs in the ID lists.
But you cannot add you cannot add other languages in other way, because you need to bind some way the assertion message to the.
Yes.
So how you can bind an assertion message to a translation?
Groups with one ID, and then it can just see if the language is there or not.
Well, I guess you can invent, keeping the messages in the file and then generate the Schematron schemas from that.
Okay, yeah.
The actual.
But you'd have to generate it or do a lot of administration. And I know why that is, but I don't see a way around it, but it would be nice.
To have it automatically somehow. Yeah, maybe. It's a point. Okay. So another option.
If we stay here,
Yes.
just like, if we have a reference to a diagnostic ID, based on the language, we can try to see is there a diagnostic _DE or that language. So, and then, if it's available, you can use that. This is something that
Yeah, maybe.
might know how to do easier. We may think about it.
The idea is that we wanted to keep with the specification, and we don't want to have our own standard, Okay. Another option is to display all the diagnostic messages, and of course, if I validate now, I'll get all the messages that are defined for my assert. Or let's say I want to use a custom language, and I'll choose the Japanese here. And if I validate, I'll get the message that it's defined here in the Schematron as Japanese, for the Japanese translation. You can put the messages, for example, you can separate the messages in different files in case you want to give them to translation and you want to make sure that the translation team don't see the entire Schematron file, and you can include them from your Schematron file, from where you use it. And you can separate them by language or by types or as you want. And oXygen also supports this validation, this master files validation on Schematron file. So if you define your Schematron file as master file, then you'll have validation on diagnostics. If you change something by mistake, if you don't add the diagnostic, or you can have content completion. You can refer the diagnostics that are available, or you can also rename one or search for some of these diagnostics. And I will show you an example. This was inspired by a question that was added by Tony Graham he asked how we can do this to separate the files, because he don't want to see all the messages in the Schematron file. So I have here an XML, also has some elements, and has a Schematron, and we have a rule that will check the dog has a bone, and the cat fish, and the rabbit has a carrot. And we see that each of these asserts has a set of diagnostics IDs that are referred, and these are defined in these included files that are here. And if we go to the English translation, we see that we have here grouped all the English translations, the French translations also here. You can also define the XML lang attribute directly on the diagnostics, so you don't need to enter on each one if you separate it like this, but you can separate it as you want. Then you will have content completion here. Let's say you want to refer here one diagnostic, and you'll get all the diagnostics that are available, and you can refer them. Or you can go to diagnostic definition just by command click on Mac or control click on Windows, and goes to the file that contains the diagnostic. If you change, for example, a diagnostic and by mistake is not referred correctly, then you will find out that there is a problem and you can fix it. And you can also rename using refactoring actions. So I can say, okay, I want to rename this in all the places that it's used, and you can preview the modification. You can see that it's changed here, and there is another change in the assertion where it's used, and will be changed in all the places. I hit rename, then the document will be valid now. Now we'll go on with the SQF updates. So we added a few new things in the Schematron QuickFix part. Now you can execute fixes over other documents other than the current one that it's validated. For example, if you have a dogbook and you have X included files or external references, you can apply the fixes on the documents that are referred, and the fix just need to refer the elements directly from the included file without knowing where is it, or without knowing what the system ID of the file. And I will show you an example. Or you can apply the fixes over other references if you are using the document function and you know the system ID of the file that you want to change. For example, if you are using conrefs in data. So let's close this. So I have here a simple example. There is an element, and I have here an included file. If we open this included file, we see that has defined an element with a value 3, and we have a fix that we have an error that says that the value should be 2. The value 2 is not valid, and the previous value should be changed or adjust the current value. So you can adjust the previous value very easily by clicking the fix, and you'll go to the file that contains the element. And if we go to see the Schematron file, we have here the assert. And we have two fixes, one that will adjust the current value and will just access the current element text value, and another one that will adjust the previous element value. And we see that in the replace operation, you just access the previous element value text without knowing the ID of the. As I told you, you can use also the document value if you don't use XInclude or external entities. And here you need to process manually the system ID and access the element. And I have here for data, for example, there is a conref, and I have a fix that will say surround some text with bold, and we'll open that file and we'll surround it with bold to fix the problem. And if we look at the fix, this is the external bold text, and we see that it uses an external step variable that is defined here, and that access the document that is referred in the conref, and also gets the ID that should be modified from that document. We also added support for user entries. Yes? Yeah?
So basically, in case when we have X-included content or external entities, we have enough information to know an element comes from this particular file, right? So you don't need to do anything specific in the schematron to have the fix applied automatically on a different file. But in case of data content references, you do not have that information when you parse the document, right? When you validate the document. Because the conref is an application level functionality. It's after the XML parsing, right? It's the data processor will perform that. So you need to take that into account also in the Schematron QuickFix. If you want to, that reference is actually to an external file, then you can use the document function to specify that the fix should be applied on a specific element from another file. But for X-include and external entities, we already have that information. When we parse the document, each element will have a base system ID. So we use that, and the fixes are applied automatically in external document.
Okay. So we added support also for Schematron QuickFix user entries. The user entry element allows the user to set a value manually when he applies a QuickFix. This is how a user entry is defined. So it has a name and a description. The name of the user entry will be used to refer the value that the user enters in the pop-up that will be shown. So the user entry name, it will be used as any variable that is defined in a schematron, and you can access the value that will be entered by the user. And you can also add multiple user entries, and then multiple pop-ups will be presented with the values that you need to enter. And I will show you an example. Let's switch to oXygen. So I have here a file that has an image, and I have an error that says that a link should be added on an image. So I want to surround this image with a link, but I don't know the link href value. So when I will click the fix, then a dialog will be presented to enter the value that will be used as href. So I will say here HTTP. Oxygen xml.com, and if I click OK, we see that the value, the anchor was inserted, and the value that I inserted, it's added here. And if we look at the Schematron file, we see that we have this fix that adds the anchor, and here's the user entry. The name of the user entry is href, and it's used in the replace operation as value for the href attribute. You can add also multiple user entries. So I have here another example that will pop up for the user for the href value. But also when I hit OK, it asks me also for the link title. So let's say lake, and we see that the anchor is inserted with the values that I added in the dialog. And if you look at the Schematron file, we have here the two user entries, one for href and one for for the title, and they are used in the replace operation right here. So it's easy to get more feedback from the user. For example, if you want to enter a custom element and you want to ask the user or a link or something that you want from the user, then or a number, yes. The idea is that the fixes now are executed later. So there is a compilation time that is done at the Schematron validation, and then after that, when the user hits the fix, it will be applied. These fixes will be applied on the document before the user will enter the values that he wants to be executed. It will be applied in the fix.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So now you have a dialog box and the user can fill in something, but often users find that difficult because they don't know what a URL is or something, or maybe they have to select an image from a connection. Would it be possible to put another user interface element there which makes it easier for them to select something?
Yes.
By calling a web service or?
Well, right now we do not have, and probably also the language, the SQF language may need to specify, you know, like this is a number, or here's a list of possible values, or something that we can use. One possibility of improvement would be to maybe collect the two user entries and present them in the same dialog. That is something that we can do, and it will be better, I think, to see, you know, that you will be asked for three things, not one.
Yeah, not one at a time.
That may be. So what Octavian tried to say is that we do not know the fix in this case until the values are provided, because based on those values you can have logic in the fix that will perform differently, right? To insert maybe something else. So we have to kind of delay the realization of the actual fix until you invoke that fix. And then we ask for the values, and then we find the script, the QuickFix script that we apply on the document. It was a challenge implementing that. Changing a little the entire architecture of how the fixes were implemented just for user entries. Because initially we knew all the fixes, but with this we have to delay. We don't know what the actual fix will actually be until the user selects that and provides the values. So Yes.
So is it possible to execute any kind of XSLT code within the QuickFix?
In an operation, you can insert any XSLT that can be inserted in a template, in an XSL template. So any.
So you could write an XSLT script that opens a dialog.
Yeah.
With your
Extensions.
You can do this. Yeah.
So Patrick will show some extensions later. Where you can pop up dialogues from XSLT.
So I didn't test it with Schematron yet, but it might be
Yeah. The user entity has also a default value, so you can define some default values that will be presented to the user when he will need to insert the value for execution, but also a type. We don't support. We don't have a support for the type attribute. There are the types from the XSLT here that you can set, and I think we will add some constraints on the dialog, on the user entity dialog. If you add the type, for example, on XSLT integer, and then an integer value, and then we can add some constraints that to check that the value is integer. Okay. We added this late fix support. So now the performance, the execution performance was improved, and if you have, for example, 1,000 fixes in a document, the performance will be much better because the fixes are not executed when the document is validated, and will be executed only when you press on the fix to be applied on the document. We also added some improvements on the displaying part. So now you can we display the fixes directly in the tooltip window, and there is also a drop-down menu in the author page that from where you can access easily the fixes. And I will show you a simple example. For example, here I have 2 fixes displayed on the tooltip, and you can easily add a new list item. And these are available also in the author page. So you can access it from the tooltip, or you have this button that appears when you hover on an error or an warning, and you can easily fix a problem directly from here. So thank you. If you have other questions, I'll be here, and you can also contact me on the Twitter, and also if you have feedback on the SQF support, you can add issues on the GitHub project, and we will discuss this there. So thank you.